Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting 132 of the House of Committee, Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. Just a reminder, please keep your headphones away from your microphones at all times. Try to leave them on the right-hand side of the circle. We'll start with opening statement. Mr. Mills or Mr. Laporte will do opening statement. Mr. Mills, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning, Chair. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Joining me today are Catherine Poulin, Assistant Deputy Minister for Departmental Oversight, Dominic Laporte, Assistant Deputy Minister for Procurement, and Kirk Albert, Acting Director of Special Investigations and Internal Disclosure. Je veux remercier le comité de m'offrir.
I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to continue the discussion on the important issues around government contracting.
Public Service and Procurement Canada, or PSPC, is the federal government's central purchasing agent, and as such procures goods, services on behalf of other departments and agencies when the value of their requirements are beyond their own contracting authority. PSPC is therefore responsible for the majority of federal contracting, but this is a collaborative relationship between departments and agencies who are responsible for identifying what needs to be done, how it can be done, and when it should be done. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of each department and agency to decide whether to seek expertise outside the government instead of doing so by working in-house. À titre de sous-ministre délégué de SPAC, je salue le travail de votre comité.
As the Associate Deputy Minister of PSPC, I welcome the work of this committee as well as the findings of the Auditor General, the Procurement Ombudsman, and others. This work demonstrates that we at PSPC have work to do to further ensure that the procurement of IT and business consulting services are open, fair, and transparent, and that processes are effectively administered.
PSPC is working with TBS to strengthen procurement, and here are some of what we've been doing. Implementing a government-wide requirement that departments explore if internal resources can be used to perform the work required prior to initiating procurement processes. New Treasury Board directive on the management of procurement to ensure managers are clear on their roles and responsibility in connecting with government contracting, communicating with departments on how we are strengthening procurement instruments, having a more robust challenge function on procurements, and implementing new mandatory procedures to ensure all contracting authorities retain contractual decisions on files, particularly for professional services contracts. SPAC s'emploie à repenser les outils de réalisation.
PSPC is working to rethink the tools we use for procurement. We are working to move beyond national master standing offers. In the interim, we are taking steps to change how these non-competitive national master standing offers are administered. This includes making sure that justifications are on file, and a challenge function is exercised whenever any federal department or agency wants to use these non-competitive instruments.
And PSPC has created a new dedicated position of Chief Contract Quality Assurance and Records Compliance. This new function will ensure that critical elements of decision-making throughout the procurement process are properly documented. It will also focus on actively monitoring compliance with procurement policies, procedures, and best practices. To further safeguard the integrity of the federal procurement, PSPC launched the new Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance this spring, which has allowed the government to better respond to misconduct and wrongdoing. Comme vous pouvez le voir, Monsieur le Président, SPAC s'affaire à la
Mr. Chair, as you can see, PSPC is working hard to advance work to modernize procurement, to make it simpler, faster, and digitally driven. The focus for all of us is on driving value through competition.
Departments need IT services or professional services. We want to ensure that they have procurement processes that deliver the most capable resources at the best value. We are implementing actions to respond to the results of audits and reviews of procurement in order to improve procurement and ensure value for money for Canadians. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. We'll start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes, please.
Clara Visser, the government contractor, recently charged for committing $250,000 in fraud under your watch. Can you tell us what the name of her company is and for which projects she worked?
Merci beaucoup pour la question. Donc, je n'ai
Thank you very much for the question. I do not have that information at my disposal in terms of what the name of the company is or what contracts were used.
So you don't know? No one, none of the witnesses here today know the name of her company or the projects that she worked on.
Donc, Madame Vesseux a sécurisé plus.
No, she secured various contracts through various prime contractors with various federal government departments and agencies. But the details of those contracts are not information that I have with me today.
Is that information that you'll undertake to provide to the committee in writing?
On peut certainement regarder, oui, dans nos dossiers et voir qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait vous fournir.
Yes, we can look into our files and see what can be provided in this regard.
Okay, so to be very clear, the name of the prime contractors, the name of her company, and the name of the projects that she worked on is the information that we're looking for. And of course, your department will have those records. So you said that you'll see what you're able to provide. Of course, PSPC is able to provide the name of prime subcontractors in the contract that they work on, correct?
Tout à fait. Nous allons regarder dans nos dossiers. Nous allons vous fournir.
Yes, we will provide that information.
Yeah, it's. I must say it's disappointing that you've come to the Government Operations Committee today not equipped with information that's, of course, in the public interest, and of course would be questions that we would ask. It doesn't speak to transparency. We've found ourselves, in this place only by virtue of answers being demanded by Conservatives at committee. So. Are you able to tell us how many more cases of fraud, aside from Ms. Visser, have been reported to the RCMP, the number of cases?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Donc, tel qu'annoncé.
Thank you for the question. As announced by our minister in March, 3 cases of fraudulent overbilling were referred to the RCMP.
So that includes Ms. Visser.
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much for the question. That does not include Ms. Visser. That took place in fiscal year 2022-23, so that was the first case of fraudulent overbilling that we referred to the RCMP. But in 2023-24, we referred 3 further cases to the RCMP, and those are the 3 cases that were announced by the minister in March.
And in addition to Ms. Visser, is there a number greater than 0 of cases that were referred to the RCMP before this spring? Yes or no, please?
Je m'excuse, je vais devoir vous demander de répéter votre question. Je n'ai pas bien compris.
I'm sorry, I will have to ask you to repeat the question.
Other than Ms. Visser's were referred to the RCMP before this year. So there were 3 this year, Ms. Visser in a previous fiscal year. How many others in addition to that? A number?
Aucun autre.
No other case. So the first file referred to the RCMP for fraudulent overbilling was the case of Claire-Hélène Visser. And after that, subsequently, we referred 3 further cases to the RCMP in 2023-24. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse.
RCMP contacted PSPC regarding criminal investigations into consultants that were not referred to them by you. So investigations that they initiated on their own or were initiated by complaints from other sources.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la question.
Thank you. To my knowledge, the RCMP has not contacted us in regard to the files you mentioned in your question.
How much money is suspected by your department as being given out to fraudsters or having been the subject of fraud? So you say there's 3 other cases. What's the total value of the suspected fraud?
Merci beaucoup pour la question, Monsieur.
Thank you for the question. It would be very difficult for me to estimate a total sum in regard to this fraud because the very nature of fraud is to resist detection, to be secretive. Therefore, without looking through the cases one by one, it would be very difficult. I know there are international organizations who say that fraud might represent between 0.5 to 5% of spending in certain government entities, but it would be entirely speculation on my part to try to give you an exact sum.
Departments, which departments are affected by the cases that have been referred to the RCMP?
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la question. Je vous dirais.
Thank you for the question. First of all, I would say that no department is entirely safe from this type of fraud. I think 36 departments.
Sorry, Chair. Okay, I'm looking for the specifics of those departments. You say there's 36. Can you provide the list of the 36 to the committee? And the minister said that the cases were totaled around $5 million. Is that the right number?
Oui, c'est un estimé approximatif qui est très juste.
Yes, that is an approximate estimate.
It's $5 million. I'm sure that there's information to support that. Can you provide that in writing to the committee? The estimate that's been compiled. I mean, initially you said it'd be difficult. The minister found it less difficult. That information was gathered for him by you and your colleagues. So I'd like to get specifics on that. It's about $5 million. You say it's across 36 departments. So I'd like a list of the departments and the estimates that correlate to each department. Are you able to do that for us, please?
Nous allons regarder dans nos dossiers pour voir.
We will consult our files to see what we can do, and we will commit to send on the information as much as possible.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, I'm sure you're aware that this committee has passed a motion. We require any requested responses within a 3-week period. Mr. Jouari, please. The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to be back. And I'd like to move that we resume debate on Mr. Green's motion regarding summer meetings. And I'd like to go on the list for speaking.
Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Great. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Normally, we'd go right to a vote on this. However, in consultation, I'm ruling such out of order because we already are in the summer. So it's an invalid motion now because we already are in summer.
So a motion and it goes to vote. I'd like to challenge the chair.
Challenging the chair on my ruling it out of order. Now we can go to a vote.
So shall the decision of the chair be sustained? If you vote yes, you vote with the chair. If you vote no, you vote against the chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Jouari.
Against.
Mr. Kuzmirchuk.
No.
Mr. Longfield.
No.
Mr. McDonald. Mr. McDonald?
Yes, Ken.
Against.
There we go.
Mr. Souza?
No.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Brock?
Oui.
Madame Vignola?
Oui.
Mr. Julian?
It was a crazy ruling. Against.
The worker bees are back.
4 yeas, 6 nays.
It was crazy. It was wacko.
I take great offense, Mr. Julian, at my interpretation of that, but thanks. I am overruled, so we now will vote on resuming Mr. Green's motion.
Mr. Jawari,
Yes.
Mr. Kuzmirchuk,
Yes.
Mr. Longfield,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
I'm going to suspend for a couple seconds so everyone can get a copy
Yes.
of
Mr. Barrett,
No.
Ms. Block,
No.
Mr. Brock,
An enthusiastic no.
Madame Vignola,
No.
Mr. Julian,
Yes.
6 yeas, 4 nays.
Okay, thanks. Before we resume, I'm actually going to suspend for about a minute so I can get everyone, or I can send out a copy of that motion to everyone so they do have it. So just bear with us for a minute. In the meantime, though, I had a speaking list. I had Mr. Jawari. I saw Mr. Souza. Was there anyone else from the Zoom area? Oh. Great. We're going to suspend for about a minute so I can have the clerks find that motion and send it out to everyone. Everyone, our clerk has sent out in both official languages the motion, so everyone should have it. So go ahead, Mr. Jory, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to open up by saying that we came here prepared. We came here prepared to discuss the outsourcing of contracts. It's been something that was actually put on the list back on February of 2022, and it hasn't gone anywhere. And it's good that we're actually getting back to some business for OGGO. It is a relevant topic. This is something that's both departments and all the departments has been actively working on, and there are a lot of good stories as far as what the government is doing and what the departments have been successful in doing. And the opening remark talked about the opening remark by Mr. Mills talked about all the initiatives that the government has done to ensure that not only they review, but they also put new policies in there. So we are ready. We are ready to have that conversation. Yet we see our colleagues open up by wanting to do a deep dive on a case that's in front of our CMP, and they're trying to prosecute this case as it was already publicized on the social media even before this meeting. So on that note, we would like to actually say, if it was about this, we would have engaged. But now that we're going down the path of kind of playing the partisan game, no, we're going to take the approach of no meeting unless it is emergency, and for the summer. And this is a path that's available to us, and this is the path that we're choosing to do. Had we not gone down that road and not taken that approach, and as you could see, we provided the list of all the speakers. We are all ready. We are ready to engage on that. We would have engaged, but not now. On that note, I yield the floor back to you, Chair, and those are the points I wanted to make. So we are ready, and we are ready to engage, but not on partisan. Not during the summer, not for non-emergency, about the case that's in front of the RCMP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sousa, the floor is yours. You can put your hand down. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. As was mentioned in that motion before we recessed for the summer, it was clear that the will of the committee should prevail, and that opportunity wasn't allowed or provided for. And that's not been the case. And we've had a number of motions put before this committee to try to provide better decorum and some fairness in terms of how we proceed. And so I support this motion, and I think some others do as well. And I say we move to vote on this issue, and let's stop being judge, jury, and executioner on some of these other files. I understand the publicity, but there are motions or activities taking place to manage that process already. In this case, I'd rather us do our work in the constituency where I am right now and where I believe others should be as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Mr. Barrett, then Mr. Brock, and then Mr. Julian. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, sir.
I'm not surprised, of course, Chair, that Liberal members of the committee want to try to cover up the corruption and failures and fraud that has run rampant after 9 years of their government. Here we have departmental officials in front of us. We have matters that have been referred to the RCMP, but like so many cases when we are so many examples that we have with respect to procurement, what Liberal members want is commercials about how well everything is going, and they don't want any accountability. We heard that about the Arrive scam app. It was supposed to cost $80,000. It cost many orders of magnitude more than that, and they tried to shut down investigations at absolutely every single turn. We found out, of course, that it cost $54 million, and that the contractors who worked on it, of course, have had their front doors kicked in by the RCMP, and we know now that it has been just the very top layer of the onion that is this Liberal government. After 9 years of Justin Trudeau, all that they can do is try and shut down these basic tools for accountability that we have. And, well, I know it brings them great pain to step away from their back deck and their swimming pool. We have important work to do on behalf of Canadians. I know for a certainty that folks in my community, I know for a certainty that folks in ridings across this country, 338 ridings, they want accountability for this corrupt Liberal government. That's what they want, and they want it in the summer, not just when Liberal MPs have feel like they'll tolerate questions from the public. So we have these officials here today, and I have questions prepared for the officials, and they're not allowed to answer our questions during this motion that's been put forward. That's a tactic to shut down accountability. We've seen it for it's increased. It's increased as we've uncovered more corruption and more examples of the cover-ups that the Liberals have tried to perpetrate. But my questions, it's so interesting that they find them political. How many cases of fraud have been referred to the RCMP? There's nothing political about that. That question is Canadians have a right to know, and they have an interest in knowing the volume of fraud that is being perpetrated on the government. Canadians are lined up at food banks in record numbers. They're struggling to get by, teetering on the brink of insolvency in record numbers. And what they see is contractors like the grifters at GC Strategies, who were banking tens of millions of dollars and doing no IT work on IT contracts. And we've learned that it's just the tip of the iceberg. Ghost contracting, double billing, but these guys they were adding no value. We know now that there are contractors who were employees of the federal government who were being, this Liberal federal government, who were being used as subcontractors because we were told the government didn't have the capability in-house to do it. Well, by virtue of the person working at the government, we know that they have the capability in-house to do it. Have the RCMP contacted the Trudeau Liberal government regarding criminal investigations into consultants that were not referred by the government to the RCMP? I fail to see how that's a political question. But they don't, the Liberals don't want that accountability. They don't want that spotlight on the corruption that they're presiding over, on insiders lining their pockets while Canadians struggle. How many billions of taxpayer dollars does the Liberal government spend on high-priced consultants every year? That would be the question that I addressed to Mr. Mills, who's in front of the committee today. He's not allowed to answer because the Liberals are shutting down the questioning of these witnesses. It's more than $20 billion. $20 billion. And I could ask for a precision from Ms. Poulin, who talked about the percentage of fraud on total contracting, and to extrapolate what the forecast would be for opportunity for fraud or suspected fraud within the federal government, but I can't ask because the Liberals are blocking us from being able to ask questions. They're using procedural shenanigans to stop us from getting accountability for Canadians. So the example of Miss Clara Visser, who has been charged, it's one of these consultants who's been charged for fraudulent building. We know that there's another 3 who've been referred to the RCMP. Canadians want to know how many more of these fraudsters and scammers are stealing Canadian tax dollars. So Canadians see half their paychecks vaporized by government, and they don't know how much of the money is going to cases where fraud and corruption, being the fraudsters, being the beneficiaries of the taxes that have been collected from Canadians. How many government employees, Mr. Mills, are employed as consultants? Well, he can't answer me, Chair, because of the procedural shenanigans by the Liberals. We want to know how many government employees are employed as consultants, where we have the taxpayer paying twice to get the service one time. I fail to see what's political about that, except for a corrupt, tired government after 9 years that is terrified of the accountability of Conservatives, holding up a spotlight on the corruption they've presided over. And if the claim by the Liberals was that, we're going to let the process unfold, we know that they voted against having the Auditor General investigate their Arrive scam. We know that. We know they try and block these. They're on the record. The Prime Minister, the Cabinet, the Liberal members of this committee, they voted against having the Auditor General investigate. So what interest would they have in Canadians not knowing about fraud and corruption? Well, it's because it's their buddies. These are Liberal insiders and grifters who are dining out, lining their pockets, while Canadians are lined up at food banks. That's why they're blocking it. On double dipping, my question to our witnesses is that last year, in an industry that's growing under this government, 79 cases last year, 84 cases this year of double dipping. That's people getting paid by the government and getting paid by the government to be contractors. How many of them are in a conflict of interest? And I hope that the witnesses that we have today will take the opportunity to make good note of my questions, because the questions, I maintain curiosity for myself and on behalf of Canadians looking for answers. And though you won't be formally asked by the committee to provide those answers, you of course could furnish those in writing through the clerk to the committee, because Canadians want to know. 50% of consultants being in conflicts. Do we know if any of the government employees who are double dipping are also suspected of any of the fraud or corruption beyond their conflicts of interest? So we have some who are in a conflict, that's been established. Have we established if there is also suspected fraud? Have they been cleared of allegations of fraud and corruption in those cases where the conflicts of interest have been identified? That's an important precision for Canadians. We have an appearance of a conflict, okay. We have an actual conflict, okay. Well, is it criminal in nature, or is there alleged or suspected criminality? Well, Canadians want to know. It's not partisan. That's not partisan. That's what we're supposed to do here at the Standing Committee on Government Operations. That's the purpose of our role as parliamentarians. 12 months of the year, including in July. We know that of the list of consulting companies that PSPC has created, many of them don't execute the function. They don't perform the work under the contract that they've received, like GC Strategies. And some of them just have 2 employees. So 5 of those examples. Solutions Moray Inc. They have 2 employees, $78 million in contracts. Mesa Computing Incorporated, 1 associated member, $34 million in contracts. Mobile Resources Group, 1 associated member, $28 million in contracts. Access Corporate Technologies Incorporated, 2 associated members, $9 million in contracts. Hackett Consulting Incorporated, 1 associate member, $8 million in contracts. But the Liberals say talking about this is political. Why? Are they connected to the Liberal Party? Are they connected to Liberal ministers? Are they connected to Liberal members of Parliament? Is that why it's political? Because my questions to officials aren't about Justin Trudeau unless he's connected to those companies, which is, I guess, the contention of the Liberals who are blocking us from asking these questions of the officials who are seated at the table in front of us. What value did Canadians get from Solutions Moray Incorporated for $78 million? That's my question. What value did Canadians get from Mesa Computing Incorporated for $34 million? What value did Canadians get from Mobile Resources Group for $28 million? And what value did Canadians get from Access Corporate Technologies Incorporated for $9 million? What value did Canadians get from Hackett Consulting Incorporated for $8 million? So without officials being able to answer, having the officials muzzled by the Liberal MPs, we're just left to speculate on the value or the reasons for these contracts having been awarded. Is it because the minister directed that the PSPC minister directed that these companies be awarded these contracts? Are there connections between the Liberal Party and these companies? Is that why the Liberals are muzzling the officials who are before the committee today? We don't know, because the Liberals are blocking us from asking the questions. We could suppose that there are individuals who are perpetrating fraud on the government who's not delivering, not executing on their fiduciary responsibility to protect Canadians' tax dollars, who are not doing their job. And so we have grifters and fraudsters and scammers who are taking advantage. That, if the charge of the Liberal members is that that's too political, well, is it because you feel responsible for it? Because the Liberal government is responsible for its failures. It is responsible for the allowing the grifting and the fraud to run rampant. So I'd like to know from our witnesses today, are high-priced consulting middlemen still being used throughout the government? Has the minister done their job to stop the racket from continuing? Now, if the answer was yes, the Liberals would, of course, want this questioning to go ahead. They'd want the officials to say, of course, the minister's taken strong action. But we're now left to see that they're muzzling the officials, departmental officials, Because is it not true that at this very minute there are middlemen like GC Strategies just soaking Canadian taxpayers? More examples of people like Clara Visser who are perpetrating fraud on the government, picking Canadians' pockets. But maybe the minister doesn't know. So I would, of course, ask if the minister has been briefed on the value Canadians are getting for the hundreds of millions spent on the middlemen who do no actual work. Was the minister briefed? What was the date? Did the minister request it, or was it offered by the DM or the ADM? And then if the minister didn't request it, or if the minister wasn't briefed, well, I would propose that perhaps we hear from the minister as to why they didn't take an interest. It's very interesting that instead of basic accountability, the Liberals immediately see it as a political crisis. I think it's very telling. I think it's very telling that they see this as a political crisis. Is it because they can't handle any more crises? We know that they're refusing. The Prime Minister is refusing to even meet with caucus, his Liberal caucus. But I don't expect it's because they're concerned about these issues, or they'd have the opportunity today to ask officials questions and show their constituents that they're concerned about the cost of living crisis after 9 years of Justin Trudeau and his inflationary spending. Because they're collecting more in taxes. They've raised taxes on the middle class that they've been very effective at shrinking. The middle class, not the taxes. The taxes grow, the middle class shrinks. But are Canadians getting more services for it? What's been the increased benefit to Canadians for the $20 billion? We know what the increased benefit's been for the likes of Christian Firth and GC Strategies. We know what it's like for the scammers and the fraudsters who are stealing from Canadians. We know what the benefit is for them. No one was holding them accountable. Imagine the delight. Imagine the joy on the face of the grifters, of the thieves who have been perpetrating their crimes, carrying out their crimes against Canadians, stealing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars in individual cases. And then many of those cases to find out that the Government Operations Committee, don't worry, they're going to stop asking the hard questions that have produced action from a government that was completely caught flat-footed, completely unaware, is the best case, that they just didn't understand that they needed to protect Canadian taxpayers. Worst case is that they're complicit and that they're connected and that they're more worried about the consulting class than they are about Canadians who work incredibly hard and see their earnings vaporized with inflation and see their paychecks more than halved in taxes, with taxes. What a gift to the corrupt that the Liberals are giving them by attempting to stop accountability. Just count, you can picture it. They've got their countdown clock to to each break so that they can, each break in parliamentary proceedings. Well, the House isn't sitting upstairs, so there's no way committees could meet. Of course committees can meet. My constituents are well represented if I'm in Ottawa for 4 hours. Does it mean I might need to pack a few more meetings into another day? Absolutely. But when I see them, I don't hear from any of them. You know, you guys have too many committee meetings in Ottawa. It seems like it's getting a little too political down there. You asking for answers about all of that money that's hemorrhaging out of Justin Trudeau's Ottawa. You know what? That's not something that I hear from people. I hear that they're struggling. I hear that they want change. They want change by this government, and they want a change from this government. They want a new government. But in the meantime, they expect that after the what would have been a devastating loss for the Liberals in Toronto St. Paul's, losing a safe seat in Toronto, that there would see some kind of change in terms of their posture, their approach, that they take Canadians' concerns seriously. So I don't know if you heard, Chair, there was a cabinet shuffle last week. Real change from a government that promised real change.
Real innovator.
A real innovative change.
Yeah.
And just like shuffling chairs on the Titanic, they moved one guy from over there to over there. When one of their ministers decided to flee the sinking ship, they moved another guy who was already in cabinet into that spot. Real change. I don't think they got the message, Canada. Because here we are today talking about fraud, talking about conflicts of interest, talking about waste, scandal, mismanagement. And instead of asking a single question of officials, what's the very first thing the Liberals do? They want to pass a motion to block all meetings in the summer. That tells you everything you need to know. It tells one everything they need to know about a government that after 9 years can't even calculate the waste. And we have the officials at the table. It's addressing corruption. And they said that, you know, it's political. Oh, this is political, that they want to talk about it. I haven't heard anything mentioned that's not about accountability for the government. I fail to see what those members, what Liberal members could be doing that they can't spare 2 hours. The majority of them are joining virtually. They didn't leave their so they're still in their constituency. They can have a meeting immediately before it with a constituent and a meeting immediately after it with a constituent. But if they're busy, that it doesn't need to be a regular member of the committee. All members of the House are associate members of this committee and can be brought in as substitutes. I'm a sometimes regular, sometimes associate member of this committee. But the work is very important. And I know that for Ms. Block and for Mr. Brock and for myself, though we're participating in the meeting today, there are many other colleagues who are very interested and offered to make themselves available for the meeting, because they're hearing the same things that we're hearing from their constituents and from Canadians when they're visiting other communities. And that's that they're concerned about affordability, and they're concerned that after 9 years, this Liberal government seems completely unconcerned with their plight. And is very comfortable. These Liberals are very comfortable with $20 billion going out the door to consultants in a year, having nothing to show for it. And when we dig in, when we just peel off the first layer, we immediately start to find fraud and corruption. And we're seeing that the private sector, there's entities and individuals in the private sector who are carrying out this fraud and corruption, and the government has been investigating and suspending employees now that we've turned up the heat. But they were taking no action on it. And it's just like the $1 billion green slush fund that they didn't want to talk about. Well, you know, there was going to be a consulting report about that, and it was all good, and they were going to handle it. And we pressed on them, on that Liberal government. We demanded accountability. And what did we find? The chair, another appointee, they're now under investigation for conflicts of interest. The Auditor General's report was damning. All of the Liberals voted against it, which is damning. And they ultimately had to shut down Sustainable Development Technologies Canada because it was so corrupt. What, I think more than 180 conflicts of interest were found? They had directors in the room, and the Liberals were fine with it. They had directors who were voting on giving their own companies money. And they said, oh, well, they talked to their lawyers, so they said there was no conflict, so there's no conflict. I know Canadians don't see it that way. But it took incredible pressure. Incredible pressure. And we had to drag them kicking and screaming every step of the way. But we've got part of the way there. We're achieving some accountability. We're getting some answers. We're going to need to get Canadians their money back, because that's an important part of this too. And I think that's one of the main messages that should come out of this, is that the Liberals are prepared to disengage from the accountability mechanisms, and Conservatives are taking a very common sense approach. If you steal from Canadians, you will be caught, and we will get the money back. And you ought to be jailed. Now, that's not something that we can control. We'll refer the matters to the police. The police can refer to the Crown. The Crown can take it to court. But what can we do? We can root out the corruption and get the money back. Now, why is it that the Liberals don't want to get the money back? Who got the money? Who got Canadians' money that these Liberals don't want to get their money back? Is it because they know them? It's because they're Liberal insiders? Well, we could ask the officials some questions, but the Liberal procedural shenanigans are blocking that from happening. Public servants working as consultant contractors with the government. We know that it's a growing industry. It's a growth industry for bureaucrats who choose to engage in it. Ticked up to 84 identified cases in 23-24. And we know that half of them were in a real or apparent conflict of interest. Alenia International. It's an international development consultancy providing technical and management expertise. They've received $14 million in government contracts since 2016. Think Digital, a digital consulting firm, has received nearly $400,000 in government contracts. One of their employees was a candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada in the 2019 election. Now we're on to trouble? Is that why the Liberals have their procedural shenanigans today to stop us from asking questions? Make sure that their failed candidates and buddies are getting their $400,000 in government contracts. Canadian Equality Consulting Incorporated specialize in diversity and inclusion consulting. More than $500,000 in government contracts since 2021. H2 Analytics, intelligence and defense consultants help decision makers turn information into intelligence. $2.4 million. If they work for the government, why is the government paying them a salary, benefits, pension contributions, and then also paying them consulting fees worth millions of dollars? Like, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Why are we allowing that to happen? And I know that when we passed a motion about banning the practice of double dipping, that we had, I think it was National Defense said that they were fine. That after a parliamentary committee passed a motion condemning the practice, you had a department say, no, we think it's fine. That's the contempt. That's the contempt that this Trudeau government has for Canadians. That even when elected officials condemn a practice, to have a department say, no, we're good with that. We think it makes good sense to pay government employees in contracting, to pay them with contracts as well, to get them paid twice. It's absurd. So is that what's political that the Liberals don't want to talk about? The absurdity of the policies that they've not just presided over, that they have departments promoting. Saying they're going to keep doing it. They think it makes sense to hire someone because they're the best person for the job, and then to hire them as a consultant because they're the best person for the job. Well, are they... How is it possible that they're both the best consultant and the best employee? They're getting paid, and they're getting paid twice. Shouldn't we be using that person's expertise in-house? Because we hear all the time, well, we need these outside contractors because we don't have the in-house expertise. Well, all those middlemen companies billing what amounts to hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not adding any value. Google and LinkedIn, maybe, or maybe we have departmental officials telling companies like KPMG that if they want to get the contract, that they've got to be a subcontractor to a two-person outfit with a couple of jokers working out of a basement who are just marking everything up 30%. It's not added value. It's not bringing in any expertise. And it's incredibly expensive. And it's certainly not like the government's presiding over, financial management that sees us in some kind of boom times. They've spent more money. They've racked up more debt than all governments before it combined. That's their legacy. They'll often brag about, well, no one spent more on housing and got worse results. That's the part they're leaving out. No one's ever spent so much to achieve so little. And I guess that would have to be the Liberal campaign slogan, and that's why we haven't had an election, to say nothing of the lack of confidence that Canadians have in them. And I get asked very often if it's frustrating or disheartening to see what's happening here. And it is absolutely frustrating. It is disappointing when you see members of Parliament willing to shut down, Liberal members of Parliament willing to shut down a key accountability mechanism that we have here, a tool to use on behalf of Canadians. That's disappointing. It is disheartening. But I have great heart and hope for our country, because in spite of the challenges that have been foisted upon them by Justin Trudeau's Liberal government, they continue to work hard. They will persevere. And they know that, because life wasn't like this before Justin Trudeau, and it's not going to be like this after he and his government are gone. It's deplorable, Mr. Chair, to have Liberal MPs come here and say that it's not important to get accountability for Canadians and it's too political. I'm sure it's too damaging politically for their government, but we're not going to abide that and let them say, well, they're awfully busy. We'll get busy with the right things, because they're able to have these meetings from they don't even need to leave their constituencies. They don't even need to leave their constituencies. It's 2 hours. Ask some officials some questions. Do the work. This is the work. This is part of the job. So, of course, I don't support the motion in its form. I have more questions for officials. So if this is going to get shut down, I will speak again, Chair, to at least advise the officials of what my questions are for them. Give them the opportunity to get back to us with some of those answers, because Canadians deserve the accountability. When I talk to them, when I hear from them, they're demanding accountability, and that's the function that we're providing for them. So. So I'm interested to hear what some of my colleagues have to say about this. But if this meeting is not going to go forward with questioning officials, I'll have more questions to pose to the officials, even if the Liberals are going to block the bureaucrats from answering them.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Brock, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. I have much to say, but I want to start by offering my sincerest apologies to Mr. Laporte, Mr. Mills, Mr. Albert, and Madame Poulin for this shameless display of a cover-up between the Liberal government and the NDP coalition partners. Because we're all here to do a job. You all have jobs to do when you get back to your respective offices. We are taking you away from your respective offices and the good work that you do day in and day out. And it's no different with politicians. As parliamentarians, we're parliamentarians all year long. We're not parliamentarians when the House is sitting. We don't take a 3 to 4 month break and not worry about our responsibilities to the government, to Canada, to address ongoing issues that are a prevalent concern in Canada. And that is the issue with respect to the fraudulent billing and the broken procurement system that we have in this country that has allowed fraudsters and grifters to take advantage of a broken system that didn't provide the appropriate oversight. And the Liberal government and the members of this Liberal committee, with their NDP partners, don't want to get to the truth. When I say we're parliamentarians for the entire year, that's exactly it. As Michael Barrett articulated, my colleague, members of my community in Brantford Brant, my constituency, know that I have to work year-round. I have to work from time to time in Ottawa and for extended periods of time in Ottawa, in addition to my responsibilities to my community. In essence, parliamentarians can walk and chew gum at the same time. And as my colleague indicated, 90% of the Liberal members of this committee and the NDP member are not here physically in Ottawa. They're taking advantage of what Parliament has allowed in terms of a hybrid format to do just that, walk and chew gum at the same time. Take meetings before, take meetings after. I too had an extremely busy day today, a very busy day tomorrow, but you know what? We all have incredible staffs. We can reschedule meetings. And when I tell my constituents, I'm here fighting for you and to be your voice, to ask the tough questions, they want me to do my job. They don't want to see me flipping hamburgers, stuffing a hot dog, handing out balloons and other trinkets to children. They expect me to do my job as a parliamentarian. When I have the ability to spend time in my constituency, I do that, all the while balancing a family life. I'm the proud parent of 2 twin daughters. At 15 years of age, I can tell you, that's quite challenging.
That's why you have no hair.
That's right. That's why I have no hair, according to the chair. But it really angers me because, and you witnesses have been, this isn't your first rodeo. You've all been either party to or have heard how many of your colleagues across a number of departments have prepped, have prepared, have attended in person, even though you got the ability to appear hybrid as well, but to attend in person, and after giving your opening statements, working hard on your opening statements, getting one round in from the Conservatives, only to be met with gamemanship by the Liberal bench, supported by their NDP colleagues. For me, it has happened at least a dozen times since January the 1st. And in my view, it is so disrespectful to you as professionals. So that's why I offer my sincerest apology. But should we be surprised? Because where there's controversy, there is risk. The government clearly knows they're not currying any favor with Canadians. Depending on the poll, they're at least 20 points down. A leader who refuses to smell the coffee and realize he is the most disliked prime minister in the history of this country, completely tone deaf to the reality, tone deaf to his own caucus, who quietly and quite often publicly voiced their displeasure with his leadership. So they will take cues from a failed leader as a prime minister. They'll take cues from a prime minister's office who loves to control and to mitigate the damage. We've been exposing the damage of this issue every single week at government operations. That's the mandate of government operations, to take a look at problems, to identify those problems, to get the full picture, and to look for solutions so that the problem can be resolved in the future. If these members view that to be political or acting as a prosecutor, as Mr. Sousa has often indicated from time to time, or being too prosecutorial, Mr. Brock, you've given up your former career as a Crown prosecutor. You're a parliamentarian now. It's time to be nice. Throw the softball questions to witnesses. That's not our job. Our job is to ask the tough questions, get the answers that Canadians are asking. So when we talk about political gamemanship, this is exactly what happened today. Because there is a lot of problems with this issue that needs to be explored. We all remember the famous slogan that Justin Trudeau used in 2015, "Sunny ways, Canadians, sunny ways." He even then wrote an open letter to Canadians, and I'm going to read various passages of that letter. It was dated November the 4th, 2015, starts off, "My dear friends."
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
And there's a point of order.
Excuse me, Mr. Brock. Yes, Mr. Jory.
First of all, I want to thank you for the latitude that you've shown on the spectrum of the conversation that we're having, and also thanks to my colleagues for the patience. But I'm not sure. And Canadian now can see exactly why we call it this meeting a politicization than anything else.
What's the
Having
point of order,
said that,
please,
I'm looking for relevance of referring to by-elections and referring to, it's all about to the fact that the motion that we are debating.
Thanks.
So what's the relevance?
I do find it relevant, but we always do offer very, very wide berth for such debate, and it is the motion put forward allows, because it's not very specific, allows an extremely wide area to debate. Continue, Mr. Brock.
So partway through this open letter to Canadians, the Prime Minister says, "Our country faces many real and immediate challenges, from a struggling middle class to the threat of climate change. If we are to overcome these obstacles, Canadians need to have faith in their government's honesty and willingness to listen." Emphasis mine. That is why we committed to set a higher bar for openness and transparency in Ottawa. Government and its information must be open by default. Simply put, it is time to shine more light on government to make sure it remains focused on the people it was created to serve, you. But in order for you to trust your government, you need a government that will trust you. When we make a mistake, as all governments do, it is important that we acknowledge that mistake and learn from it. We know that you do not expect us to be perfect, but you expect us to work tirelessly and to be honest, open, and sincere in our efforts to serve the public interest. Before the election, we also made a commitment to bring new leadership and a new tone to Ottawa. Moving forward, we will pursue our goals and objectives with a renewed sense of collaboration. We fully understand and appreciate that partnerships with provincial, territorial, and municipal governments are vital to deliver the real positive change that we promised you. To close, I am deeply grateful to have this opportunity to serve you and every Canadian across our great country. I am committed to leading an open, honest government that is accountable to Canadians. Repeat, accountable to Canadians. Lives up to the highest ethical standards. Brings our country together and applies the utmost care and prudence in the handling of public funds. Thank you for having faith in me. Thank you for putting your trust in our team. We will not let you down. What an absolute joke. An absolute lie. We're talking about fraud in this committee. In my respectful opinion, the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, committed the biggest fraud on this country and Canadians. Everything that I read out in the record, he has done the complete opposite. Just that last line, to apply the utmost care and prudence in the handling of public funds. Would we be in the mess we are right now? Would we have the amount of public debt that we have now if he actually for 1 minute had respect for $1 of taxpayer money? Would we be spending over $21 billion on outside consultants and contractors with no oversight? Would we be in the situation where we've expanded our federal public service by 40%, increasing salaries substantially? Have Canadians looked at their level of service across this country and say, wow, I've received 40% more in value of services? I think if all four of you and Canadians who are watching this right now on my social media were to contact my staff in my constituency office, who spend all day long either on hold with various departments or dealing with issues that should be handled by our professional public service. They have very little time to do anything else other than government work. And I'm sure I am not alone in that assessment. I'm sure this is not just a conservative issue. I'm sure my Bloc friend, colleague, Madame Vignola, would probably concur with me, because I've been talking to various MPs from across this country who are facing the very same thing. And I'm sure every constituency of the Liberal bench and the NDP member who is appearing virtually also has similar stories, because that's what's happening. We are not getting value for our tax dollars. And I hear that daily from constituents. I hear that daily from Canadians from coast to coast to coast on my social media. They applaud me daily at my diligence in asking the tough questions. I often said, you know, you can take the prosecutor out of the courtroom, but you can't take the prosecutor out of the politician. It's a strategy. It is a method that I've honed and developed for 30 years. And I know that when I ask a question, based on that response, there might be another 10 questions I'm going to have to ask. Because it's like peeling that proverbial onion. And I know that various journalists from across this country have remarked, in my view, very correctly, that the rot in this government that this committee and other committees are exposing is just the tip of the iceberg. And we have a mandate as parliamentarians, we have a mandate as proud members of the mighty OGGO to ask those tough questions. So this is not political gamemanship, as Mr. Jawari has remarked on a number of occasions. It's not acting as a prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner, as Mr. Sousa often remarks. It's asking the questions that Canadians have been asking us. And I can only speak for myself and my Conservative colleagues, and I dare say I will probably speak for Ms. Vanyola. We take our responsibility as parliamentarians extremely seriously. And our role is to listen, to advocate, and to seek solution. Government bench, Liberal bench, they don't want nothing to do with it. I made the time to be here, as did other members who are physically appearing here. Mr. Jawari, I had great faith. I saw Mr. Jawari when I walked into this room. I said, great. We actually may complete a 2-hour meeting here in the summer. But how disappointing to hear the moment that he got the floor that he wanted to shut this down and prevent any further summer meetings. So just like Mr. Barrett, I wanted to ask some very relevant, pertinent questions that I think Canadians wanted to hear me ask, and Canadians wanted to hear from you officials as to your thoughts on this. And I know Mr. Barrett, my colleague, mentioned whether or not there was a fear from the Liberal members on this bench that some of the questions we'd be putting to you would expose political bias. And I'm going to give you an example of what I feel they wanted to shut down. But the nice thing about this is I've got the floor, and Mr. Jawari and all the Liberal members on this committee and Mr. Julian can't shut me down because there is relevance to what I'm about to put to you. Now, there's a company called Think Digital. I don't know if all 4 of you are familiar with that. I'm not expecting an answer, of course. Think Digital is a consulting and coaching firm. Think Digital has received nearly $400,000 in government contracts over the past 2 years. Nearly half of the contracts they have received were sole sourced. 2 contracts were awarded by PSPC. I'm going to leave aside the discussion of sole sourcing because that literally could take on a life of its own. We know that there are rules that allow sole sourcing, but we also know through various reports from the AG and the procurement ombud that there were serious violations of those rules to allow Liberal-friendly consultants and contractors to receive government funds. Classic example of that, GC Strategies. Now, maybe this is what they didn't want you to answer. There are Liberal Party of Canada links to Think Digital. Surprise, surprise. The CEO of that company, Ryan Androsoff, is a Liberal Party activist and donor to the Liberal Party of Canada. A consultant of Think Digital, Winter Fedak, made 78 donations to the Liberal Party of Canada and was the Liberal candidate in Regina Leuven in 2019. She is listed as a 2023 mentor on the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation website. Trudeau Minister Terry Beach appeared on the consulting firm's podcast just 3 months ago. Now, on the surface, red flags galore. You don't have to be a Conservative opposition MP. And for the Canadians who are watching this, the big question, what the hell is going on? Do you have to have Liberal ties to secure hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money? Well, on the surface, it certainly sounds that way, doesn't it? So the question I would be putting to PSPC is as follows. Is there a process? Does the government vet and screen for Liberal Party links before handing out $400,000 in taxpayer money? If it doesn't raise any alarm, does it raise any alarm bells, or the red flags as I reference, that the CEO is a Liberal activist? Does it raise any alarm bells that one of the current employees ran for the Liberal Party and made donations? We already know about the Liberal-friendly linked firm like McKinsey receiving over $200 million since Justin Trudeau took office. Has Minister Duclos asked for a review of firms receiving government contracts that have direct ties to the Liberal Party of Canada? If you responded, I'm not aware, or no, I would be asking you, would you be willing to commit to undertaking such a review? But I guess the big question that's on the minds of myself and Mr. Barrett, I'm sure Ms. Vignola, and Canadians, what value did Canadians receive in these contracts? We have 2 million Canadians using a food bank every month. I attended my own local food bank not too long ago. I was shocked to hear about the statistics of the number of people in my community using food banks. And surprisingly, people who are using out of necessity were the very same individuals who once donated. When food prices were under control, when we didn't have runaway inflation, when we didn't have the punitive carbon tax that is making life so unaffordable for everyone in my community and communities across this country. This is the unfortunate legacy of Justin Trudeau's Liberal government. Rent prices out of control, bank economists warning about mortgage defaults coming, tent cities right across Canada. How did that $400,000 to a Liberal-friendly company, contracts half of which were sole sourced, a Liberal candidate, a failed Liberal candidate, who then gets rewarded at the taxpayer's expense? How is that delivering value as per Justin Trudeau's promise in 2015? He lied. He lied repeatedly over the last 9 years as to how he is delivering for Canadians. And it's a mockery. It's a mockery on the intelligence of Canadians who now see through this government's jargon and bullet points and talking points and appearances in front of cameras. You know, we often say this government gets an A in announcements, big flashy announcements, all kinds of constituents or Canadians behind them, but an F for follow-up, an F for delivering. We got issues with the $10 a day daycare program, significant issues, benefiting all Canadians, coast to coast to coast. Tell that to families in my community who are on wait lists. Tell that to families in the county of my constituency who don't have access to transportation to take one of those $10 daycare spots. Let's talk about the problems with the dental care program. You know, every time we bring up the reality of what Canadians are facing day after day after day, what do we hear from the government? Take, for example, our Deputy Prime Minister, Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland. But Canada has a AAA credit rating. Well, you tell that to the single mother in my riding who is deciding to go without feeding herself to ensure that she puts food on the table for her children, who goes to Goodwill or Salvation Army, and through the generosity of other neighbors, she picks up some used clothing, but she's able to buy clothing barely for her children. Do you think when she's struggling at the cashier, we all know spending $100 on groceries today might net you 1 to 2 bags, most likely 1 bag? Do you think when she's struggling to pay for those groceries, she's got Chrystia Freeland ringing in her ears? But I should be proud that as a nation, we have a AAA credit rating. It's tone deaf. And we've been raising these issues with the government every single day in the House. And when we're not sitting in the House, we are raising those issues on our social media channels. The government refused to listen. Now, the Liberal bench and the NDP bench say we've never had it so good. We have never had it so good as a nation. Trust us. Well, you know what? I have been in Mr. Sousa's riding. I have been in Mr. Juari's riding. I have not been in Mr. McDonald's riding, but I look forward to that opportunity. But I've been in Windsor as well. And I've talked to those constituents, and they are not immune. They're not living in silos because they have a Liberal member. They are feeling and facing the same dire economic consequences of this failed Liberal NDP government. That's the reality. And those members should be listening to those voices. It's no wonder that all the members of this Liberal bench are facing the prospect of losing in the next election. Because this is the reality. This is the failed government that they defend day after day after day, and are doing it today in this shameless example of partisanship. Now, Justin Trudeau talked about, in that letter to Canadians, he talked about having the most ethical government, perhaps the most ethical government this country has ever seen. Not only, as my colleague Mr. Barrett has articulated, not only does he have the legacy and distinction of being the only prime minister to have accumulated more debt than any other prime minister of this great nation combined. Not only that, he is the first prime minister. He is the first prime minister to have been found guilty. Let that sink in. To have been found guilty of ethical violations. First one being the Aga Khan vacation, the Christmas vacation, where he claims, I thought I was complying with the ethic rules. Clearly, he didn't read the legislation, or his handlers. We know that the Prime Minister doesn't like to read. That's been quite evident. He gets read to by his handlers. So perhaps the handlers didn't take the time to properly inform him that there was obviously some ethical issues with accepting that vacation. But what stands out in my mind, and this was before my career as a parliamentarian, I've always been a political junkie all my life. I follow it religiously. I could be involved in the most complicated and protracted homicide trial as a prosecutor. I'd always find time to watch the news, to keep up on what's happening in Ottawa. And I remember when the story broke by the Globe and Mail about the interference in the SNC-Lavalin issue. And the Prime Minister looked Canadians in the eye by staring at the reporter's camera and said that the story that broke that morning in the Globe and Mail was false, that he took no steps to interfere in the decision-making of Canada's first Indigenous Attorney General and Minister of Justice. See, the Prime Minister has a penchant for lying. He's a very good liar. And that's a classic example of a lie. He was cornered, he was caught, he doubled down, stared Canadians in the eye, and said, I didn't interfere. Ethics Commissioner saw it otherwise. Ethics Commissioner interviewed everyone literally that touched that particular file and found, in summary, a protracted interference activity, not only by the Prime Minister, but various ministers, the Prime Minister's office itself, Katie Telford and Gerald Butts, two of his prized handlers. Chief of Staff right now, Katie Telford, Mr. Butts off in New York City. But what was revealed in the report, the Trudeau II report that I read from Commissioner Dion, extremely troubling as a former officer of the court. They're on record as communicated by former Privy Counsel Michael Warnock. They confirmed they didn't want to hear about the law. They didn't want to hear about legalities. Just get the deal done. Give SNC that deferred prosecution agreement. Here we have the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff disregard the laws of Canada, disregard the Criminal Code of Canada, and get the deal done. That is disgusting. It is appalling. And that's why I am just so vigorously entrenched in this whole concept that a National Police Service, the RCMP, needs to revisit this SNC investigation issue, because there is a lot more evidence that they need to consider. So, getting back to the ethical standards, it's no wonder when you got the Prime Minister who so easily breaches our ethical standards that he sets an example, for his entire government. It's no small wonder that various ministers, various MPs, including backbench MPs, have followed suit and have been found guilty of ethical violations. You know, there was a point in time with our Canadian governments, there was a concept of one and done. You commit an ethical violation, has been found guilty, even suspicion of an ethical violation could result in a member's ouster or resignation. But who has resigned in the Liberal government after having been found guilty of ethical violations? Zero. Because there's no accountability. So when he says in his open letter to Canadians, we're going to make mistakes, we need to apologize to Canadians and do better. Have you heard any heartfelt apologies from the Prime Minister or anyone from the Liberal government? No. They've created a culture of incompetence, and Canadians are fed up. They were sold a wrong bill of goods. Former Prime Minister Stephen Harper tried to warn us. In every one of his predictions about what Justin Trudeau was really about has all come true. We didn't listen, or I did, but the majority of Canadians in 2015 did not. And here we find ourselves in that situation. So that was a line of questioning that I wanted to bring to your attention. I had other, before I move off on Think Digital, I've actually researched on Open Canada the contracts that were provided to Think Digital. And one thing that really concerns me, and this was a contract value dated December 13th, 2023, for a value of just over $70,000. The work description, tuition fees, and costs of attending courses, including seminars. So is the Government of Canada now in the business of providing free tuition and costs to a Liberal-friendly company? Certainly appears that way, doesn't it? $70,000. And that wasn't a one-off. I found another example. $12,870, March 2nd, 2022. Fees and costs of attending seminars and workshops. So the government has retained Think Digital, has given them the authority to attend various seminars and workshops to gain greater knowledge and skills at the taxpayer expense. What about all the other consultants out there in Canada that are playing by the rules? Maybe they're not contributing to the Liberal Party of Canada. They're not making donations. They're going to have to probably fund those courses and that tuition on their own. But when you are a failed Liberal candidate, there's a little bit of loyalty that the government will extend to you. So what type of message does that send to Canadians? You're not a prime minister for all. You're not looking out for the best interests of Canadians. You're looking out for the best interests of Liberal supporters. You financially contribute to the Liberal Party of Canada, wink, nudge, you're going to get your just desserts. You're going to get your benefits. We'll find a way to get it done. Sorry you didn't win the election, but we'll benefit you. Just stay in touch. That's the message Justin Trudeau wants to send to his cronies. And that's what this committee wants to examine. This is what this committee needs to examine. This is what this committee, Canadians, demand to be examined. Another thing, another area that I wanted to get into is the constituents I speak with and the constituents or Canadians, I should say, from across the country who respond to my social media are very grateful for the work I'm doing and my colleagues in exposing the rot in this government. And they're saying, good job, keep at it, keep digging, keep peeling that onion. But when are we going to get our money back? Okay, when are we going to get our money back? So one of the questions I would be putting to you, Mr. Mills, I just need a moment to find it, is when Minister Duclos, your minister, with the president of the Treasury Board, Anita Anand, made the announcement in March of 2024 about the 3 cases of suspected fraud that went to the RCMP, where there was an estimation of $5 million in fraudulent overbilling or activities. Minister is on record saying that day that his department has revoked or suspended the security clearances of the contractors, and, this is the emphasis, and is taking action to recover the money. That was 4 months ago. There have been no announcements by Minister Duclos or the Prime Minister or anyone in government about the efforts to collect that money. And this is what I'm hearing daily from Canadians. This is our money that was illegally given to these fraudsters and grifters. We want it back. Just think globally. If there was an appetite by this failed, tired government to actually recoup those losses, what it could do to our national debt. But I have concerns. We hear from the Canada Revenue Agency that despite its ballooning staff force, they don't have the means. They don't have the means to collect even the overbilling for the COVID payments. That they're writing off tens of millions of dollars in cases where taxpayer money was wrongly sent to Canadians. We've heard the horror stories of just how fast and furious money was being distributed by this government. No scrutiny, no channels of investigation. You put the claim in, we're going to trust you, we're going to accept it at face value. We don't care if you're in prison, we'll get it to you. We don't care if you've deceased, we'll give it to you. We don't care if you live outside of Canada, we'll give it to you. And now after the coast is clear and the dust has settled, and we take a look at the millions, tens of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, that was wrongly sent to individuals, well, we don't have the staff. We don't have the proper mechanisms to recover. That's not good enough. You know, we're a G7 country. My God, we are a first world country. Find the tools to get the job done and recover Canadians' money. That's what they expect. I was going to bring to your attention an opposition motion brought by the Conservatives, supported by the Bloc, supported by the NDP, I believe supported by Independents and the Greens. It was an Opposition Day motion heard February 27, 2024. This is regarding the ArriveCAN issue. The vote that passed was the next day, February 28th. And the last aspect of that motion, I'll read into the record. To call on the government to collect and recoup all funds paid to ArriveCAN contractors and subcontractors which did no work on the ArriveCAN app within 100 days of the motion being adopted, and for the Prime Minister to table a report in the House demonstrating that taxpayer funds have been repaid. This was the will of Canadian Parliament, voted on in favor by every opposition member, except the government, of course. 100 days from February the 28th would have been June the 6th, that passed over a month ago. From June the 6th to today's date, 46 days have passed. And what have parliamentarians heard, and what have Canadians heard? Nothing but crickets. So, the obvious question to your department: has the minister given you direction? Has the minister adopted a regime to recoup the tens of millions of dollars given to Government of Canada Strategies, also known as GC Strategies, and its grifter, Christian Firth? What have you done? Is it in process? Has the government recouped anything to tell Canadians we are the stewards that we said we would be for the taxpayer? That's just one example. I personally, I know Mr. Barrett and Ms. Block, we really wanted to dive deep into the number of cases that have been referred to the RCMP. The RCMP, and I understand this from my past background, wanted to attend committee and provide as much information as they could. The end result was we didn't learn a lot because they're in the middle of investigations and they wanted to preserve the integrity. I get that from a legal perspective. I don't get that from a parliamentarian perspective. And that's why I kept asking the questions. Can you give us a sense, Commissioner? Can you give us a sense as to how many cases of potential criminal activity, largely fraud related, is the RCMP currently investigating? Couldn't give me a number, but I asked the question, is it more than 6? And I believe it was the Deputy Commissioner who confirmed, yes, it was more than 6. Now we know, because Minister Duclos and Minister Anand confirmed, 3 of those cases went to the RCMP. We now know, and it was confirmed in your responses to my colleague, Mr. Barrett, that we have another individual who defrauded the taxpayer for $250,000. So that's 4. The question I put to Minister Duclos when he last attended, I believe it was OGGO, left a very sour taste in my mouth. I don't know if he consulted with anyone here, but I was going to ask you, was there any, in fact, there may have been some of you seated beside him when he testified. He confirmed very proudly, as did Minister Anand in March, that this was simply the first wave, that other waves would be announced in the very near future. But he went further. He said back in March that there were 10 to 15 other cases of suspected fraud that had the potential of being referred to the RCMP. His words, not mine. So when he attended recently, I believe it was in June, early June, I followed up on that. It wasn't a got you question. There wasn't no malice behind it. I was being inquisitory. Of the 10 to 15, Minister, that you announced in March, how many of those did you or your department refer to the RCMP? Simple, straightforward, basic question. But of course, in usual fashion from Minister Duclos, I get word salad. Wouldn't answer the question. I asked it again. Wouldn't answer the question. I asked it a third time. Wouldn't answer the question. I asked it a fourth time. Wouldn't answer the question. I gave up after my 5th attempt. Why is it so difficult for you to give me a number? If it's 0, tell me it's 0. Are you still considering? Tell me you're considering. If you referred, tell me what you referred. I'm not asking for specifics. I'm not asking for names. I'm not asking for dollar value. You told Canadians 10 to 15 were being investigated in the second wave. So naturally, Mr. Mills, that would be the question I would put to you. You know, I was very disappointed in your minister for his absolute refusal to answer a basic question, but I think it's a relevant and important question that Canadians need to know. So maybe we'll have the opportunity at some point in the near future to ask these questions, and I'm glad and I'm seeing that all 4 of you are taking notes so that when we do meet again, perhaps you're going to have answers for us. You're going to be prepared to give us responses. Maybe there's details that you can't provide to us for confidentiality reasons. I don't know. But at least you've been forewarned and you've got a glimpse into the type of questions we would be asking. So in addition to that, I would be asking
Mr. Brock,
you.
I apologize. It's 1 o'clock. We are out of resources. We only booked to 1, so I am adjourning at this time. Sorry.